Jason Crawford straightened his expensive tie and checked his reflection one last time before entering the glass tower that housed TechVision Industries. Confident that this final interview would secure him the senior marketing position he desperately needed, what he didn't expect was to walk into that boardroom and find himself face to face with the one person whose life he had made. Miserable 15 years ago. The girl whose accent he had mocked mercilessly. Now sitting behind the CEO's desk with quiet power radiating from her every gesture 15 years earlier, Lily Chen had arrived at Riverside University with nothing but a worn suitcase, a scholarship that barely covered her tuition, and an accent that carried the musical cadence of her grandmother's village back home. She wore the same 3 outfits in rotation, hand-me-downs from her older sister who had worked double shifts at a factory to help pay for Lily's books. And she spoke English with the careful precision of someone who had learned it as a second language, pronouncing each word with a slight hesitation that revealed her humble origins. Jason, on the other hand, had been everything Lily was not: wealthy, confident, and cruel in the way that only privileged young men can be when they mistake cruelty for wit. He came from a family where money solved problems, where connections opened doors, and where people like Lily were invisible except when they provided entertainment through their differences, their struggles, their accents that didn't sound like the polished voices that echoed through the halls of his private preparatory schooling, their shared economics class. Jason had made it his personal mission to humiliate Lily whenever she spoke, mimicking her accent in exaggerated tones that made the other students laugh, asking her to repeat words just so he could mock the way she pronounced them, making jokes about her clothes, her lunch that smelled of unfamiliar spices, and her serious dedication to her studies that he dismissed as trying too hard. He never saw the way her hands trembled when she raised them to answer questions, never noticed how she stopped speaking up in class, never cared about the dreams he was slowly crushing with his casual cruelty. Lee endured it all with a dignity that Jason was too young and too privileged to recognize, working 3 part-time jobs to support herself, studying until dawn in the library because her shared apartment was too noisy, and sending half of her tiny earnings back home to help her family while Jason spent his weekends at parties funded by his father's credit card, never once considering the weight of responsibility that Lily carried on her 19-year-old shoulders. Breaking point came during their senior year presentation on international market strategies, when Lily had prepared what would have been a brilliant analysis of emerging markets in developing countries, drawing from her personal understanding of economic challenges that textbooks could never capture. As she began her presentation, her voice slightly shaking from nerves, Jason interrupted her within the first minute with a theatrical yawn and a loud comment about how maybe they should get a translator since he couldn't understand what she was trying to say through her accent in the classroom. Erupted in uncomfortable laughter, and Lily's face flushed with embarrassment and pain as she struggled to continue, her confidence shattered by the public humiliation. She finished her presentation in a barely audible whisper, her brilliant insights lost in the shame that Jason had deliberately inflicted, while he sat back with a satisfied smirk, completely unaware that he had just witnessed someone far more intelligent and capable than he would ever be. Someone whose accent carried the music of resilience, whose clothes might be simple, but whose mind was extraordinary that night. Lily made 2 decisions that would change the trajectory of her entire life. First, she would never again allow anyone to make her feel ashamed of who she was or where she came from. And second, she would work twice as hard as anyone else to prove that success isn't determined by the accent you speak with or the clothes you wear, but by the strength of your character and the power of your determination. She spent the rest of college avoiding Jason completely, pouring all her energy into her studies, networking with professors, and building the foundation for a future that would be entirely her own creation after graduation. While Jason coasted into a comfortable position at his father's friend's company, Lily moved to the city with nothing but her diploma, her unshakable work ethic, and a business plan she had been developing since that humiliating day in economics class. She started as an intern at a small tech startup, working 18-hour days, learning everything she could about business development, marketing, and innovation, sleeping on a friend's couch for 6 months until she could afford her own tiny studio apartment in her accent, which Jason had mocked so mercilessly. This became one of her greatest assets as she built relationships with international clients. Her ability to communicate in 3 languages, opening doors that remained closed to her monolingual American colleagues. She understood markets, cultures, consumer behaviors from a perspective that her privileged competitors could never match. And she used every slight, every moment of discrimination, every time someone underestimated her as fuel for her relentless climb towards success in years of strategic moves. Brilliant campaigns and innovative thinking led her from that internship to founding her own consulting firm, which she eventually sold to TechVision Industries before accepting their offer to become CEO at 32, making her one of the youngest executives in the industry. Throughout her rise, she never forgot the lessons learned in that college classroom, using her position to create opportunities for others who had been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed because of their backgrounds now. As Jason walked into the boardroom expecting to meet with some anonymous executive about a position he desperately needed after his father's company collapsed and his connections failed him, the irony of the situation hit like a physical blow. There sat Lily, poised and elegant, in a tailored suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her once mocked accent now refined but still carrying traces of the heritage she had learned to embrace rather than hide. Her eyes holding a mixture of recognition and something that looked remarkably like compassion. "Hello?" "Jason," she said quietly, her voice steady and professional as she gestured for him to take a seat across from her. While he stood frozen in the doorway, his prepared interview speech evaporating as the full weight of 15 years crashed down on him. He saw immediately that she remembered everything. Every cruel comment, every mocking imitation, every moment of deliberate humiliation, yet her expression held no trace of vindictiveness or revenge. Only a calm professionalism that somehow made his shame burn even deeper. Lily. I didn't know, ... double quotes, he stammered, his confidence completely shattered as he struggled to process how dramatically their positions had reversed. How the girl he had considered beneath him now held his professional future in her hands. She watched him with the same patient attention she had once given to his cruelties, waiting for him to collect himself, giving him the grace he had never offered her. "Please." "Sit down," she said again, and this time he moved slowly to the chair, his hands trembling slightly as he realized that the woman across from him had every reason to end this interview before it began, to repay years of humiliation with a simple dismissal that would be perfectly justified. Instead, she opened his file and began reviewing his qualifications with the same thoroughness she applied to every decision, treating him with a professionalism that highlighted just how far she had risen. "Above the petty cruelties of their shared past, your resume shows some interesting experience," Lily said, her tone neutral but not unkind, "though I noticed some gaps in your employment history that we should discuss." Jason realized with growing horror that his privileged background, which had once seemed like such an advantage, had actually left him unprepared for real challenges. While Lily's struggles had forged her into someone capable of building an empire from nothing, the interview lasted an hour, during which Lily asked thoughtful questions about Jason's experience, his vision for the role, and his understanding of international markets. She treated him with the same respect she would show any candidate, never once referencing their college history, never using her position to humiliate him as he had once humiliated her, demonstrating a level of grace and professionalism that left Jason feeling both grateful and deeply ashamed of the person he had been when the interview concluded. Lily stood and extended her hand for a professional handshake, her expression remaining neutral as she told him they would be in touch within the week. As Jason reached the door, however, she spoke once more, her voice carrying just a hint of the warmth that had been buried under years of carefully constructed professional armor. "We all have the capacity to grow beyond who we were in college, and I believe in giving people the opportunity to show who they've become." 2 weeks later, Jason received a job offer, not for the senior position he had applied for, but for a junior role that would allow him to prove himself through work rather than connections. The accompanying note, written in Lily's precise handwriting, simply said, "Everyone deserves a second chance to be better than they were, including those who forget to give second chances to others." It was a kindness he knew he didn't deserve, offered by someone who had every reason to refuse it if This story touched you and reminded you that our greatest strength often comes from our greatest struggles, and that true success is measured not by how we treat those above us, but by how we treat those we have the power to hurt. Please subscribe for more stories that celebrate the transformative power of grace, forgiveness, and the courage to rise above our past mistakes. Share this with someone who needs to remember that every ending can become a new beginning when we choose compassion over revenge.